yet, but we wanted to get pre-show banter started for everybody. In case you are new to Wild West Hacking Fest or our Hackin casts, first of all, thank you for being here. And second of all, we would ask you to join our Discord server. All of our chat and QA during our webcasts take place on our Discord server. So I'm going ahead and sharing the link to that now in the GoToWebinar chat for everybody. And right now we are in the live chat channel, which is the channel with the little bullhead next to it.
Oh, you know what? I just put it in the nerd herd. Oh, it's one of those days. Good morning, everybody. Welcome.
Happy time zone, like we always say, or
oh yeah, I guess
happy time zone to everyone.
Yes. Yeah, we like to say happy time zone because we never actually know what time it is where you guys are. For most of us, it's like middle of the day, but I know some people joining us, it's probably the middle of the night or very early in the morning.
And you know what? Nick LaPointe says, hey, everyone, looking forward to Roger O'Farrell's talk. He and I go way back. That's awesome.
Awesome.
That is awesome. Well, welcome, Nick. We're glad you're here. We're glad you're here. So we were just having a conversation. I won't mention any names, but I was just on a call with my cell phone provider. And it may or may not have gotten a little heated. Does anybody else have those issues?
Yes, I actually had this same issue this morning. But we were talking about the difference between customer services and being in customer service, how I try and like go above and beyond and be like super nice to the people because I know it's not their fault. Mm-hmm. And, you know, they're just following policy and different things like that. But then like if a customer service person gets rude with me being in customer service, I get a little aggravated with that. It's definitely not, you know, I'm coming in with this good energy, like don't come at me with bad energy. We just can't do that. So and Belda will be getting a credit of $8 on her account. We will ensure.
Yeah, well, it's $8.
Hey, if I saw $8 laying on the ground, I wouldn't just walk past it. I mean, I'd pick it up. And then Shelby was talking about people not being allowed to touch money where she went for her customer service experience, which was weird. So yeah. We've had all kinds of weird conversations already this morning. You guys missed it. We didn't want to call any people out. But this is pretty much what we do. In case you're new to this and new to Wild West Hackin Fest or anti-siphon training, this is pre-show banter. This has absolutely nothing to do with what you're here to see. We show up early because you show up early. You show up early because we show up early. It's this vicious cycle that we just keep repeating, and it's great. So welcome.
Yes, the actual Hackin cast will begin in about 20 minutes from now. But until then, you can come hang out with us. And yeah, it was weird going into like a drugstore and having them, you know, they have that whole like regular checkout area and then the one self-checkout, and they were making everyone use the self-checkout. And when someone asked why, they said it was because they're not allowed to handle the money. So
it's like, is that a trust issue? Is that a COVID issue? Is that that's just, it seems like just issues all the way around.
Yeah, I'm hoping that's not something that becomes a normal thing in stores, because
I know
I like self-checkout sometimes, but sometimes I don't want to deal with it.
Kitten says, Velda, Shelby, Innkeeper, Megan, nice to see you. Well, it's nice to kind of, it's nice to see you. I'd like to say
nice to be seen.
It's nice to see you in Discord.
Yes, nice to see you in Discord. Wish we could see their face.
And we are happy to be here. It feels like it's been, what's it been, 2 weeks since Deadwood?
Has it been?
Oh man, I've lost track at this point. 2 or 3 weeks, something like that.
This is 3.
This is 3?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I have a question. Do we have anybody who went to Deadwood or attended the virtual con on here? And if so, did you have a good experience, I hope? We don't want to hear about bad. No, I'm just kidding. We do.
Ooh,
Just email me.
Warlord. Whoa, whoa, Nella. Whoa. Bring it down. Bring it down.
Oh man, that's a gift.
Woo.
Wow.
What's that TikTok though that people do that voiceover?
I keep wondering if maybe Warlord had a bad customer experience this morning too.
Well,
It's just
could
high
be.
energy.
Yeah.
Warlord's bringing the energy.
Yes, definitely.
Nick said hashtag too long since Deadwood.
Yes.
We're getting a little further away, but we do have Way West in the works now for 2022.
Yeah, let me
So,
get that link. I'll post that in there.
Yes, yep. We're moving over to San Diego again for this one. So I'm excited to be going to California in May.
Mandy says, pre-Banter, woohoo! I love it. Oh, it's so good.
Did Deadwood really get 6 to 9 inches of snow?
Yep. Heather sent me a picture, or I guess I shouldn't say Laura sent me a picture, our post mistress. She sent me a picture, and yeah, it looked pretty ugly in her neck of the woods.
Oh
Wow,
man.
that's crazy. I hope we get snow this year. We haven't had snow in a while here really in Virginia. Where's everybody else from? Post in live chat where you're joining us from today. We always like to see where people are from. We've got some Nebraska, Florida, Virginia in the house.
Yes. It's been a few years since I've seen snow in person. Starting to get a little homesick.
You'll have to come
Sorry.
visit us.
Up here, you guys can come up and visit.
So it's kind of funny. My friend actually was just in Massachusetts for her cousin's wedding, and she brought back real Vermont maple syrup, which is very hard to find down here. And when you do find it, it's very expensive. So that
Yeah.
was awesome. And she also brought a bag of fall leaves so that we could see all the fall colored leaves and stuff instead of just the palm trees.
So Jake and I are in Nebraska, and our leaves are not pretty this year. Do you think, Jake?
Yeah, they're not. I've got a tree that just looks sad.
I have a maple tree right outside my window here, and I'm hoping that it becomes pretty, because everything is really not. It's not a pretty fall like it normally is.
Yeah, I have a feeling we're going to go from, late summer to winter this year.
Yeah.
It'll just be a quick, all the leaves fall
We
off.
haven't really started changing here in Virginia yet, that much. Some of the trees, but they look more like they're just dying instead of just like doing the pretty fall leaf color thing.
Yeah, that's kind of what's happening here too. When I was talking with our counterparts up in Deadwood, and Spearfish and Rapid, they were saying they're really concerned about the trees up there because the foliage is still on them, right?
Mhm.
And so you get snow and you've got the heavy leaves and everything, and so we're hoping
Yeah,
for
like
better things for them.
power outages and stuff, probably. I would imagine that they get real heavy in fall.
So Captain Carson Tiva says bonjour. When I
And he
went
also
to
said the
France,
spearfishing t-shirt is sick.
what's that?
He said the spearfishing t-shirt is sick. And that's a good thing. Sick is good.
Sick in a good way.
Sick in a
Speaking
good way.
of sick, look, I don't know if you guys can see this, but I have my hacker incentive from Salty
Oh.
Security on.
Love
Did
it.
you guys see? I mean, did you guys? they were so gracious. They sent me this really cool swag bag.
Yeah,
From
Salty
there.
Security has some really cool swag.
They
Yeah.
do. I don't know if you guys are looking for fun stuff. Let me see if I can find it here real quick. They have the coolest, the craziest stuff, and it's such attitude, right? I mean, they
Yeah.
got fun stuff. I'm going to put a link here in the Discord on it. But if you haven't checked out their stuff, it's fun. I love this T-shirt though. It's tie-dyed and it's got the hacker incentive on it, and it's just really fun.
Yeah, yeah. And for anyone who doesn't know, Salty Security is one of the Wild West Hacking Fest sponsors.
Yeah.
So
This
And
is
if
true.
anybody is out there in Discord land or go to webinar land and want information on Way West 2022 sponsorship, we are open for that. So if you want to send an email to support@Wild West Hackin Fest, reach out to me and I'll be happy to get you some information about sponsoring our upcoming event.
Nice segue, Megan. Nice segue.
Hey, listen, I can customer service some stuff sometimes.
So again, as Megan said earlier, this is not the actual show, the actual webcast. In fact, our guest hasn't even shown up yet, has he?
he's sitting in the background. Roger, can you hear us?
I am here. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
can
Did
hear
you
you.
want to hop on camera and chat with us for pre-show?
Sure. Let me go ahead and do that. All right.
And there he is.
Hey,
Thank you for having me,
Roger.
guys.
Thank you for
Roger,
being here.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. Roger had submitted a CFP to our event in Way West, and there were so many selections, but his was one that had come up as a real high possibility, or had gotten lots of votes. So we felt like it was worth bringing Roger on here to do his webcast in person here on our Hackin Cast. So we're very glad to have you. Thank you so much for your submission. Speaking of that, the submissions for Way West, our CFP, Jake and I will be working on that, and that will be coming up here shortly. So if you're interested in submitting to a talk, you'll have 15 or 15 minutes. Please make sure you keep an eye out on our webcast or on our website. We'll go ahead and also send it out via Twitter and Discord and everything else as well. But we're super excited. Jake and I met with a gentleman. His name is Derek Rook yesterday, and Derek has confirmed that he will be one of our keynote speakers
Nice.
at Way West. So we're super excited about that. We're excited to have him. And Roger, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, I'm sure. Happy to do so. I'm a lifelong IT security practitioner. I've been doing IT for it's been 20 plus years. I kind of dated myself there, but yeah, it's been a passion of mine. I started doing security maybe like 8-9 years ago. And yeah, that migrated into cloud and all the cool stuff happening now. I'm an information security manager as a day job, and I do a little bit of teaching on the side. So that's kind of what I've been doing.
Fantastic.
Nice.
Where are you located at, Roger?
I always answer that as Chicago-ish. I'm in the Northwest Indiana, sort of an extension of the Chicago Metro, but in Indiana, but within commuting distance to Chicago.
Gotcha.
Nice.
And have you had any customer service issues lately? Sorry, I had to ask.
Yeah.
Understandable.
We were discussing before you came on customer service and how it seems like there's a pretty big gap in customer service these days. We make sure here, obviously being the director of customer service, I find it very important to be a very good advocate for our customers. But other places are just not so customer servicey these days.
It's so true. So some people are just surviving out there with employee shortages and supply chain issues and all that. It's like
I know.
customers, who has time for that?
I know. But it's so important. I mean, it can make or break your organization. You know, the big, huge ones, obviously, they don't care. They've got, millions of customers, but it's super important to us. I mean, we definitely try and treat our customers, our vendors, our speakers, everybody, you know, how we want to be treated. So
Exactly, and yeah, we want to make, and that's kind of the cool part of Anti-Siphon and Wild West Hackin Fest, right? Is we're here to transfer knowledge, share our knowledge, help one another. You know, John does his pay what you can trainings. We have others. We have, I believe, Chris's training coming up next week, right?
yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Shelby, do you want to just talk about that real quick? Just because it's a pay what you can training, there is a floor on it. We do have a $25 minimum, but you can pay anywhere from $25 to $44.95. What we always say is, if you can afford to pay more, pay more. It helps people who can't afford to pay much. So, do you want to talk about that, Shelby, or do you feel comfortable, or?
Yeah, yep. So Chris teaches a couple different classes, one of which, the one we're talking about right now, is the Getting Started with Packet Decoding. That's kind of his very starter intro to threat hunting class. So if that's something you're interested in getting into and don't know where to begin, his Getting Started with Packet Decoding class would be the perfect place to start. As Velda was saying, it's priced on a pay what you can scale. So that's between $25 and $4.95. Those who pay $195 or more do get 6 months of free access to our cyber range as well, which you can learn more about the cyber range on the Anti-Siphon training website. But yeah, it's the pay what you can classes. We have a couple different ones of those. This one's being run next week, and we have another run coming, I think, in December or late November.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah.
It's a great opportunity. I love the whole pay what you can idea, right? It's just such a great way to share knowledge and to get the education, you know, and ensure that we're doing our part to secure the world, so to speak, I guess.
Yeah.
So awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, all of our pay what you can classes are considered kind of intro entry level classes. So they're for people who, you know, are trying to get started in the industry and most likely don't have the funds from a company to be able to afford the higher price classes. So it's nice that we give that option for people, you know, something they can afford on their own.
And I'm super excited because Miss Shelby, and I got to give her a lot of credit for this, was really instrumental in helping us put together a website for Anti-Siphon. And if you have not seen it, I just posted a link and I'll pin it. The website is pretty amazing. I'm pretty stoked about the whole thing. So if you get a chance, go over there, take a look at it. We also have LinkedIn and Twitter. Let me see if I can find the links for that if you'd like to follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. Anti-Siphon's like a real grown-up company now.
Yes, it's branching off into its own thing, which is awesome. Liquid Gecko asked, is the Anti-Siphon included in attending Wild West Hacking Fest? So right now for Way West, we only have the in-person registration open. In the next couple of weeks, shortly, you should see us open up the training registration as well. So those tickets will be priced a little bit higher, but it will include the 2 days, 16 hours total of your Anti-Siphon training class, along with your ticket to Wild West Hacking Fest. And with that, you still get the 6 months free access to our cyber range and all the other benefits you get with the Anti-Siphon training.
Right.
Correct. And we will also be doing a virtual portion of Way West as well. So stay tuned. That'll be coming up as well. I'm going to go ahead and post our Twitter handle in here if you'd like to follow us on Twitter. I just posted it. We also have a LinkedIn. Let me see if I can get over here to that one as well. If you'd like to follow us, we'd love to have you along for the ride.
Oh yeah.
It looks like we're about 5 minutes till. Shelby, did you want to go over any housekeeping things before we get sidetracked into a different conversation, which tends to happen?
Sure. So if you are joining us with GoToWebinar, and then I want to let everybody know you will receive an email tomorrow afternoon containing a certificate of attendance from today that you can use for CPE credit. However, if you are joining us through YouTube, which for anyone who doesn't know, that's now our option, or a second option while watching our webcast. We now have it live streaming to YouTube immediately, which means that if you can't stick around for the full hour, that is okay. It is being live streamed to YouTube, which means the recording will be available as soon as we're done, which is super awesome. That's better than having to wait a little while like we used to. But you have to make sure you're joining us through GoToWebinar if you want to be able to receive the certificate of attendance. So, like I said, you'll receive that tomorrow afternoon via email. This is being recorded. I usually would also go over the fact that we offer anti-siphon training courses. We already talked about those a little bit, so I'm not going to go into extreme detail. But you've seen the slides going through during the pre-show banter. All of those are classes that are currently on our training schedule, so you can check all of those out on the anti-siphon training website. Also, just one more reminder that we have the in-person registration open for Way West in May of 2022. So hopefully we will see you in San Diego.
And just a reminder, we do have a webcast next Wednesday, IR Playbooks, a open source resource from, I'm gonna butcher this name, Mathhouse. Any takers on this one?
Hold on, let me get there. Let me get there and help you out. I feel like this is
Solner?
Okay, hold on. Let's see. What is it? IR Playbooks. It's Matthew Solnier.
Close enough. If you're interested, registration is open on that, and we'll be working to add some more Hackin Cast to our schedule here very shortly.
Yes, yeah, usually 3 Wednesdays of the month we'll offer free Hackin Casts, which are 1 hour. And then every couple months we also do roundups as well, which you've seen a slide for on this slide deck. So we have another one coming up near the beginning of 2022. But actually, if you want to keep
2021, probably in December.
Okay, even better. So we have one coming up in the next couple of months then, and you can stay updated on all of that stuff by being part of our mailing list, which if you're joining us on GoToWebinar, you are automatically added to our mailing list as well. So you'll get updates on when all of that stuff is happening.
We'll also add the website to the Discord.
Yes.
All right. All right.
All
so we're
right.
3 minutes away.
Yes. And Roger, I'm going to hand
real time.
I'm going to hand presenter over to you now. That way you can start getting your stuff set up.
Awesome. We'll take care of that right now.
And Roger, no pressure, but we did have over 1,700 people sign up for this.
No pressure.
Did I mention that?
It's fine. We just like to pretend like we're just talking to each other. It's fine.
Just don't look at the number of attendees continually climbing.
Right.
We'll ignore that, no problem.
And before we get started, I'm going to mention the Discord one more time for anybody who's just joining us. We have a special Discord server that we use for all of our Hackin Casts and the roundups we do and everything. Today, we are in the live chat channel, which is the one with the little bullhead next to it. And right above that channel, you'll see one called Slides. And we've shared the PDF of the slide deck for today inside that channel as well. And we are about 1 minute from the actual start time.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, this has been fun, guys. I feel like it's been way too long since we've done this. So
I know.
It's like fun to have the group all back together.
I know. It's like getting the band back together.
Yeah. So we're back on.
Yeah, we took a hiatus for Wild West Hackin Fest, but we are back.
We are.
Yeah.
We are.
Well, it looks like his slides are there. Looks like we got about a minute. We've pretty much gone over everything, right?
Yeah. We've established our customer service is A+.
Yes. Yes. And if you have a bad customer service experience, it's totally my fault. So reach out to me and I will make sure that I make it up to you.
Awesome. And we have turned the clock to the top of the hour. So, Roger, we're going to hand it over to you to start. And
All
we will
right.
see you in a little bit.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for taking some time to be here with us today. And thank you for all the fine folks here for inviting me to chat with you today about cloud security. It's no secret that there's a lot of stuff going on in the cloud. I don't think a day goes by where we don't see some sort of breach or something that's happening out there. And the idea of this talk is to help those out who may be in that position, like, hey, listen, the boss comes to you and tells you, hey, you know what? We're going to the cloud, and that's it. You're going to be it. You're going to be having to secure our cloud stuff that nobody here understands. So good luck. Let me know how it goes. So that's kind of the idea here. And I'll explain as we go through why this is important. We're going to go back to the basics, understand what is it that you're walking into. And the way that we're going to tackle the problem, we're going to frame the issue that we're having. So what's happening out there in the cloud? What is the sort of issues that we're seeing over and over and over again? What's the problem that's creating for you, for your company, for your leaders, for everybody? And what are we going to be doing as security practitioners to help solve that problem? We're going to have to go back to the basics. There's a lot of good, great stuff happening in the cloud, but we will see that we're failing at the basics. We're going to see how to fix that. We're going to talk about some particular native tools for Azure and AWS that you can start leveraging today without too much work. And we're going to show you also what's going to be the next thing after you understand the basics. What else do you need to start to be taking care of? So you can say, I have some confidence, that some good level of confidence that we're building security on a solid foundation in our cloud presence. Now, I'm going to show you a little bit of a demo towards the end of some of the tools, because it's all fine and dandy if I tell you, oh, this tool does this, does that. But I want to walk you through a few things to point out, again, those basics that you have to make sure that you take care of before you go ahead and start building more complex things. And of course, Q&A at the end, so we can have a nice chat about what's in your mind, what would you like to know more about, any challenges that you're having, anything to that effect. So without that, having said that, I should say a little bit about me, which I mentioned some of this in the pre-show banter. I've been doing IT for a long time. Same thing with security. I started in the typical, what I call a typical path, if there's such a thing. Started in IT, desktop, network, servers, no databases because they're awful, and I'm just not a database person. But anyway, moved on to security, and yeah, I've been doing that for maybe 8-9 years now. My day job, it's leading a team of defensive security. We do cloud security, forensics, IR, and basically everything else. I'm spoiled by having a great team of people who know how to secure all the things. So I'm the leader for that team. I teach at the college level. I also teach with SANS, their cloud 488 security class. So kind of that's a high level of what I've been doing. And the picture here, what I'm trying to convey is like, hey, if you're in that position that says, hey, go ahead and secure the cloud. We're going to go there. Help us do this. We need some help. You're going to be it. This is what you may think, because you may get excited. I remember when I first started working with the cloud many years ago, I was like, oh, that sounds so cool. Let's go ahead and tackle that. And it sounds awesome. And don't get me wrong, it is, but the reality of what you may walk into when you are going to start doing security for some cloud presence may look something more like this. You realize quickly that you're going to have a lot of different things that need some finessing. You may have some issue with misconfigured buckets. We're going to see some examples of how prevalent that issue is. Over-provision access. It's something that we've been saying forever. Basics, least privilege, and still people are failing at it. Dormant accounts. I read an article maybe a couple of months ago about a lady that got fired from, I think it was a credit union, and she logged on like a few days later after she got terminated and deleted a whole bunch of IT resources or backups or data, and yeah, it was bad for the company. She was of course prosecuted and whatever, but why is that happening? It's still happening out there. We have dormant accounts that are things that should be terminated that are going to come and bite us at some point, because we're just not taking good care of killing access when people leave companies. Same thing happens in the cloud. Encryption is another thing. I'm still surprised that some providers don't encrypt some things by default. It's what it is. Multi-factor is another one of those things that we have proved for a long time that they do help solve a lot of those password attacks that happen out there. But again, for some reason, some people refuse to use multi-factor. And visibility, that's another big thing, because you can have as much great security as you want, but you have to understand that it's never going to be static. Everything is always going to be changing. You have to keep a set of eyes on what's happening, patterns that may be observed in your systems, access logs, you name it, every kind of log. We'll talk more about that, but it's a big thing. And again, a lot of us still have a little bit of limited visibility into our environments. And to put it into perspective, how common is this problem of cloud breaches? I just chose a couple of examples, and these are all really, really new. This is less than a year old. Thousands of customer records exposed. What else? IoT devices breach on the cloud. Another data breach. You see, there's no shortage of breaches related to the cloud. It's just like literally every week something is coming up. These are from August this year, from March. Buckets exposed, patient records. You kind of get the tone here is like basically everything is getting exposed left and right. So it's a big problem. And what you notice here is that none of this is the fault of the providers. Sure, if you follow cloud security, you have seen that there has some big vulnerabilities. Azure has had a terrible couple of months with some big issues that came to light. But what we're talking about here, this is not really something that the providers are doing. They're not exposing our data in buckets. They're not exposing our systems out there. There's a theme that's emerging here that we're going to see in all of those breaches that I mentioned. And what I have here, it's sort of a direct quotes from those news articles. And if you notice, there's a word that it's coming up every single time, either misconfiguration or some variation of that. Cloud storage was misconfigured. Something was publicly accessible. Internal customer support database accessible, configuration error. So the story basically writes itself here. There's something that's failing. And like I said, it's not the providers. It's not that they have these massive holes that are having issues, and there's something that's failing out there. And it's all of us. I'm not gonna say it's you. It's all of us. We humans are failing at securing the cloud. And we need to take a moment and think about what are we gonna do now. So we know, okay, we're failing somebody somewhere. Let it be through consoles, or if you're pushing infrastructure as code, pipelines, so however you're putting stuff in the cloud, there's a problem. We're making some mistakes, and we need to make sure that we are correcting those. There's only one logical next step for us to take after we realize that we need to do better. And that's going to be panic, right? Because it's bad, and we're going to end up on the news, and we don't want that. I mean, I'm of course being sort of funny here, but some people do this, and my message to you is don't. There's no need to panic. We need to take a break. We need to take a deep breath and consider our options. What are we going to do? We need to, one, understand the problem ourselves, and second, communicate that problem to our leaders, because if you're an engineer, an analyst, somebody, an architect, you may have fantastic ideas, but we do need to kind of put that up the chain of command so decisions can be made, and we can end up with a better security posture in the cloud. And no cloud security conversation would be complete without the mandatory share responsibility slide. And I'm kind of laughing because I think it's kind of a law that we have to include it. And some of you may say, oh, here we go again, share responsibility. We know this. And sure, you know it, but there is somebody somewhere that still does not get the idea that the provider is going to take care of a part of the security, and we as cloud consumers / customers, we're going to be also taking part of some other things. The summary here, the provider takes care of the foundations of the cloud, what builds the cloud, the physical data center, the physical equipment, the fences, the lighting. If you've taken the security plus the CISSP, you know all those physical security elements. That is what we're talking about here, that the provider is going to be securing for us, because we really can't touch any of those things. We can't touch the physical servers. We can't even touch the hypervisors. All of that now is the responsibility of the provider. Now, what do we need to do as customers? We need to understand that everything that we deploy out there on the cloud, we are responsible for securing. If you're doing infrastructure, virtual machines, networks that you deploy, we have to control the security of all of that. If you operate under a platform as a service, whatever you put there, code, it's going to be your responsibility. Same thing with software as a service. If you're putting data, because that's all you can do with software as a service, it's your responsibility to make sure that you're securing all of that. So make sure that we understand, one, and two, that our leaders and everybody involved understands who is doing what. Again, it never hurts to make sure that everybody gets the basics right. And I put a lot of emphasis on this because in a lot of places you have people from different departments. You may have finance, you may have marketing that wants to get into the cloud, business and all of that, and they want to put websites out there. Everybody has to understand what is it that's involved here. Now, as you try to start actually doing something in your environment, something that I hear sometimes is like, oh man, I talk AWS and my company's moving to Azure, or they're moving to Google or something like that. And people go crazy because they don't understand those environments. And the thing is that the basics are going to apply. If you take a look at the security guidance that the providers are putting out there, it's going to be kind of at a high level the same thing. Secure your IAM, your network, secure your endpoints, all of that stuff. It's in essence the same. What you need to understand is how services are going to be implemented across each provider. And what I have here is, listen, Google knows that AWS wrote the book on the cloud, on public cloud. Azure knows the same thing. So what they're doing is putting cheat sheets out there to say, hey, listen, if you're coming from the AWS world and you're used to talk about EC2s, Azure says, what we have here are VMs. You know, lambdas, we have functions, etc. So make sure you understand the nuances of what environment you're walking into, and that is going to be one of the first things that you have to do. But again, if you're thrown into Azure and you don't know Azure, of course, one of the first things is going to make sure that you understand apples to apples what the services are. Next thing that you can do from there, it's go ahead and look at documentation. I'm hoping that documentation doesn't look like what I have right here for you, a blank notebook, because that is the case. I remember many, many moons ago, I worked in several environments that this was exactly the level of documentation that they had out there. But hopefully somebody documented something, and anything, it's going to be better than zero. That's what I would say. But whatever you find out, if there's nothing, please don't be the person that is going to keep that vicious cycle going. Take some time as you understand your environment to make sure that you're documenting the cloud, because again, it's going to make it easier for you and those that come after you. So do keep that in mind. Something like network diagrams, it's going to be a lot of help for you. If there's nothing, no detail of configurations or anything like that, at least understanding how the environment is laid out, it's going to be super, super helpful. And kind of give you the idea, because if you see that this is what you have, you say, oh, we have databases, we have some storage, we have some network components. Now you know what to focus on. Now you start seeing here EC2s, Kubernetes, and other things that are more advanced, you know that you have to build those into the equation on how you're going to be securing all the things. So this is going to be a great starting point for that. Lots of tools out there to help us document. Cloud Mapper is one of those that has been around for a while. It's AWS specific. It started as something to document your network paths in AWS. Later on, it evolved and it can do a lot more right now. But go ahead and check it out if you're in that situation where you need to start understanding what's in your environment. That's a good idea. On the commercial side, Lucidchart also has, it's a SaaS product. It can go ahead and interact with your environment, and the diagrams look very, very visually pleasing, and there's a lot of flexibility with that tool. So again, you may want to consider something like that to help you as you document everything that you have. So go ahead and check those out. So after you understand what's out there, the next thing for you to start looking into is think about how the accounts are set up. And this is important because your accounts and the way that you lay them out, they're going to be logical units of segmentation for your cloud environments. You're going to be able to apply the concept of blast radius limitation. So if somebody compromises one account, they should have a difficult time easily pivoting to some other account. So again, we can use them as logical units of segmentation to contain potential damage and all the other things that separate accounts bring us. We may have something like a dev account, a prod, a test. If you have like a lab, have that in a separate account, because that way you're not commingling prod data with other things. And sure, you can carve some holes between accounts on what specific things can happen, like X set of people can push code from dev to prod or QA or whatever, something like that. But again, understand how the accounts are set up, or if you're brand new and sending something from zero, do understand how you can leverage accounts to create that logical segmentation that's going to help you to add some security. The example here, it's a AWS specific, but switching quickly here, Azure has the same concept. It's again different terminology. They use the concept of a tenant, and then they have subscriptions, which is kind of the equivalent of the accounts. And you can also create that separation, production, non-production, allowing you to do the exact same thing. Keep those workloads separated and creating some barriers along the way of if you get attacked and something gets compromised, you can limit the way that attackers may move through your system. GCP, Google has kind of the same thing. They use the idea of folders, projects, but again, we're seeing the idea here that is the exact same thing, just applied in a little bit of different manner with a little bit of different terminology, if you will. But once you understand the concept at a high level, again, it will apply across every single provider out there. From there, the other big thing that you need to pay attention to, it's going to be finding your doors. And that means exactly what it says. Doors help you get into somewhere. And that's what I'm saying here. Understand how you can get into your environment and make sure that you don't have any potential holes or have that door wide open, or you don't have a lock on that door, etc. Examples of doors that you should be considering: your root account. That's kind of your gut level type account that can get into all the places. When I say here, please know, what I'm saying is do not, and again, something that we've been saying forever in security, do not use high-level accounts for everyday work. People forget about this. Root has way too much access. This is something that you would use to set up your cloud presence, and then the first thing you would do after you set it up, it's create user accounts or do some sort of access federation or something. You would not use that root account. In a perfect world, you would be setting monitoring and detection cases based on usage of that account. That should be sort of a use in case of emergency, break the glass type scenario. That is when you would only use that account. So again, least privilege, don't use that account. Just leave it out there in case something out there doesn't work. Okay, now your Bastion host, that's the other potential way that you can have to pivot into your cloud environment. Remember, the idea of the Bastion host is not new. It's a super hardened workstation that you log on to, and that's the only thing that it does. It's a way to get into your cloud. You don't have it run websites. You don't have it run anything. I've seen people do all kinds of weird things, convert them into web servers. That goes against the principle of a Bastion host, which is a hardened machine that only takes incoming connections and lets you jump into your internal cloud environment. So do secure those. SSH, use keys, don't use passwords. Still see that out there. I don't understand why, but people do make mistakes like that. And I understand sometimes it's in the spirit of convenience, but again, we're going to pay the price later on. So do think about that. Access keys, those are going to be the ways that you can programmatically access your cloud environment. It's easy to create access keys and forget about them. We're going to talk about how we can identify that coming up shortly, but do account for access keys and who has what sort of access through those keys. Admin interfaces, it's a common of those issues that we see out there in breaches is like, Kubernetes console was exposed, Elastic console was exposed, some sort of admin interface that gets exposed out there. It's going to potentially cost you, it's going to cost you a headache. So think about that. If somebody is spinning something up, make sure that they're doing the right way. I used to work with a gentleman that he was the king of testing, doing air quotes, because he would, I mean, this was pre-cloud, but the idea, I'm pretty sure still happens. He would say, hey, let's go ahead and put this out there on the internet for a minute or two because I want to test something. And we're not gonna put a firewall in front of it or anything like that because it's gonna be quick. And you know what happened? He got called into something else, and he ended up leaving that there for weeks. And because you can imagine, things got compromised. So again, do not be that guy. Also, find your north. And what I mean here is how are things going to move inside your cloud and coming into your cloud environment from a region perspective, network perspective. Common mistake that still happens is that people spin up resources in one region in the cloud. If we're talking AWS, let's use US East 1 as an example, and you build a whole bunch of things there, and you build monitoring based off that, and you're detecting all the things, but your use cases might be too specific to US East 1. If somebody stands something up in West 1, most likely you may not be seeing it because your detections are looking for US East 1. So again, if you live in one or two regions, don't forget to monitor for the other regions that you don't use. Those should be silent. There should be nothing there, but it does help to build some sort of detection for those, because if an attacker thinking right, he says, okay, they're using this stuff here, let me go in this other side where there might be a little bit of a chance that nobody's paying attention. So do think about that. VPCs, the idea of, again, they're going to contain your traffic. You may have multiple VPCs. You may have peering to have one VPC talk to each other. Consider how that communication happens. For security groups, again, the basics. Risky ports, are we exposing 80, 443, 22, those ports that can come and haunt us? Do they need to be exposed? If they do, are they taking requests from all the internet? We can go ahead and circumscribe those to specific IPs. So there's a lot, again, of basic things that we see the failures over and over and over. Again, maybe there's templates or something like that and people are not paying attention, or they say this is just the quicker path and they do it that way. Another thing that's going to help you is going to be tagging. And this is something that, again, it's one of those things that you have to be doing. Almost every resource out there in the cloud nowadays supports tagging, and it could be a number of things. For example, looking at here, you can mark the department that owns the resource. Companies want to know who they're going to build for this stuff. Cost centers are going to be helpful. Is this a production or QA or whatever environment? All of this stuff is super, super helpful. The owner, who is going to be responsible for that resource. Make sure that you use that. Top example is going to be tags in Azure. On the bottom, you see the same thing for AWS. But again, this is something that you need to involve all your stakeholders. Like I said, finance, IT, security, everybody. You have to come to some sort of agreement how tags are going to be used. So you have to make sure that there's understanding and you're leveraging all of those. Right? Access Analyzer. This is one of those things that, again, we'll see here in a minute, but this is going to help you identify what has some sort of outside exposure in your cloud environment. In the example here, we're looking for buckets, and it's going to let us know that we have a bucket that is publicly accessible and has read level access, as you can see here at the bottom. So this is a very basic tool, but again, if you're new and you want to run something and take a look at the basics of what's out there, this is going to be a big help to understand what should I pay attention to right now. What's some of that low-hanging fruit that I should be taking a peek at and questioning if this stuff does belong there or not. The other important resource native to AWS is going to be config. This is a service that has a few uses. One of those inventory, as you can see there, it lets you see what sort of buckets you have, the user, security groups, subnets, everything that you have out there. Because one thing that we always say in security is you cannot protect the stuff that you don't know. And remember, the cloud is changing quickly. There's systems spinning up and down, and the way your environment was Monday morning is not the same maybe by Monday afternoon. Things do move quickly, especially we're talking about spinning up systems for peak demand, things like that. Well, we need to know what we have. Again, if you don't have something like EC2s and you suddenly see them pop up, that's something you may want to take a look at and see what's happening there. But inventory, we have to understand what's out there. We also have the idea here of the conformance packs, which basically are rule sets, if you will, to help you say, I want to observe these sort of rules. And we'll see them here when we go into the demo. But if you're PCI, HIPAA, NIST, whatever frameworks you're following, you can go ahead and deploy those conformance packs, and config is going to let you know how you're deviating from those rules, if you will, which is what we have on this side right here. So again, it's going to give you a lot of information that's going to allow you to understand where you need to put some attention. Now, Security Hub, it's another similar product. This one is going to give you a security score to understand how you're doing, where can you improve, what can you do better. And the same idea, we have different standards that we can observe, security best practices from AWS, the Center for Internet Security, we have PCI, and there's others that you can add, but very valuable to make sure that you're covering all your basic security needs. Again, doesn't mean any of this is perfect. It means the things that we're failing at, exposing buckets, overly permissive sets of permissions, buckets that are exposed, security groups with 000 as the incoming IP address and all that stuff. So again, the silly things that are going to get us compromised, a lot of them do get flagged by these set of tools, and we have to understand what they are. On the Azure side, we have Azure Security Center, very similar to the idea of Security Hub, where you're going to be able to have that inventory component, letting you know what sort of resources inventory. Okay, you have there some virtual machines, you have storage accounts, virtual networks, kind of the same thing that we just saw with Security Hub. There's also here there's a compliance section that I'm going to point out a little bit later on. But if you live in that space of making sure that you have to adhere to some of the things that we saw on the AWS side, you may also want to pay attention to those. So again, we're only talking about cloud native things. We're going to see that there's going to be some space for some tooling later on, especially as you mature your cloud operations. You're going to see that some of these tools may not do something that you want to do, but definitely they're always going to be the first stop because they're there. They're just there for you to use, and it's going to make sense to kind of try them out and see if they will fit your needs. But after we do all of that and we understand the basics and then we know how the environment is set up, we talk about the issue of visibility. We have to make sure that we're logging and monitoring all the things, at least the things that we care about. And that is something that you have to answer. What do I care about? Logging is just not turning logs on, because that's simple. You can turn on CloudTrail and a whole bunch of logs on Azure and just dump them into some storage bucket, blobs, whatever. But are you doing something? You have to make those logs actionable. Otherwise, you're not deriving any intelligence out of them. So you need to walk in there with some strategy. What data sources are we going to be logging? Do we need to log all the things? Ideally, that would be perfect, but in reality, we're gonna have some limitations of what we can log on, what we can store, and for how long we can store it. Do you need logging in real time? That might be a challenge in some cases. In AWS CloudTrail, that is not real time. It takes a little bit of time. We talk about storage and retention. Then that word that a lot of people like to throw out there, multi-cloud, and it's the hot thing, and everybody wants to talk about multi-cloud. That is going to introduce a little bit more challenges because, okay, logs from one provider are not one-to-one to another, and you're gonna have to get a little bit creative there. You're gonna need something like a one-stop shop. This is where we're seeing a lot of third-party products kind of shine, where they say, hey, listen, come use us. We're gonna ingest your Azure, we're gonna ingest your GCP, AWS logs. We're going to normalize all that stuff, and we're going to make them actionable for you. And here you go, single pane of glass. I know that's overused, but it is what it is. And there's a lot of value in tooling like that, especially as more companies try to leverage more cloud providers. So, but going back to the basics, in AWS, CloudTrail, it's what I mentioned. You just dump your logs into one place. It's going to take care of tracking every single API call that gets made in your environment. Sure, that's good. However, you can't do much with logs in CloudTrail. That's where something like CloudWatch is going to make sense. This is going to allow you to get some of that observability component, derive more details, build metrics, alarms, and then you can have all your logs in there, and you can say, you can also build automation. If we see X, Y, or Z, we can trigger something and have something else happen. Lambda functions can be triggered, notifications, etc. So that's going to be the value here for something like CloudWatch. At some point, as you mature, again, you may do something a little bit more complicated with logs. Here we have an example of a logging architecture that's really detailed. You have multiple accounts. You're doing, you have lambdas that are going to process those logs. At the end, you're going to end up with some Kibana visualizations. Very important, so you can understand finally what is it that I'm seeing on those logs. You might be able to detect patterns, issues that might be coming up somewhere. And again, this is sort of an ideal state, something you would aim to do, but do not expect to do something like this on day one, because honestly, it would be a little bit unrealistic. Remember that everything you do out there is going to be a function of maturity. You start somewhere, and you improve as you go. You try some things, you see what works, you see what the native provider solutions are going to give you. If that doesn't work, you look into third-party products, okay? Now, as we move on to talk about Azure, they also have a lot of guidance out there on logging and monitoring. And that's a good thing. All the providers realize that we need to do this. We need to keep eyes on what's happening in our environment. So there are lots of there is a lot of guidance out there for every single provider. Make sure that you understand what they recommend, and then you can start building on top of that. The one thing that I would say about Azure is that it tends to collect a little bit less than AWS, so you have to be more intentional of what you want to capture. We're going to see an example of that. We're going to jump into the demo here coming up in a moment. But again, there's going to be some logging by default. You're going to have to be very intentional of what level of logs you do want to capture. With that, after you get a hold of everything, you understand what's going on, you got some visibility, make sure that you're locking down your environment. It sounds simple. People do forget to do it. We talked about the importance of privileged access. We have to secure root, admin, any other high-level sort of account, access keys, anything that can come and haunt us. Do protect that. Deprovision unused accounts. I told the story of the lady who deleted the stuff at the credit union. That scenario is just way more common than it should be. It's still something that happens. And here we go back to what I also like, the basics, the best practices, strong password, MFA, least privilege. These are things that we are seeing in some of those exposures that are out there on the cloud. They seem so basic because they are, and people do keep failing at some of these. Do think carefully, make sure that you're covering your foundations, because it's easy to forget about one of these things. In regards to AWS, to kind of get a hold of who's using accounts, how they're using it, do they really need to be there? There's the IAM credential report. This is a spreadsheet that you can go ahead and download, and it's going to go ahead and tell you, okay, these are all the users that you have. This is when the user was created. The user logged on using a password. The last time that password was used was on X date, and they have an access key that was used on Y date, and it was rotated on Z date. So it's going to give you a lot of good information. What you can go ahead and do with this is say, okay, these users have never logged on with password, with access keys, with anything. Do they need to be there? This is going to help you with that cleanup. Now, if you have a small environment, sure, run this, look through it. You might be able to spot something, but this is not really going to scale if you have thousands of users. You're going to need to do something else. This is where something like automation is going to help you. You might be able to pull this report with the CLI or something else and build some sort of automation that can go ahead and kind of summarize this. And I mean, automation is going to be one of those things that can take you anywhere. So start thinking how you can leverage this in a programmatic manner to kind of do some parsing, and again, understand what can potentially we kill here that it's not being used, right? Now, Access Advisor, it's another thing that it's going to help us in AWS to identify those users that may have over-provisioned permissions. If we provision, something that I see happen a lot is when they say, okay, what permissions we're going to give this user, they pick one of the predefined AWS or Azure, whatever provider roles, and say, okay, this is the universe of permissions, but do they really need all of that? This is going to help answer that question. It's going to let you know, okay, this user did access these set of permissions. Now, these others, they have never touched that. So that invites the question, least privilege. Should I remove that level of access? Not saying that the answer is yes, but the answer is let's look into it. Maybe you have a new user that you provision and you say, oh, they haven't used S3 bucket access, read access in 15 days. Well, what if they have like an end of month routine that requires them to access that? So think about that. It has to go through what I would call a full cycle to understand the permission sets. And again, don't go deleting things randomly because they seem bad. Understand the use patterns, what your people are doing, what sort of access they need. Always do consider that. Trusted Advisor from AWS also is going to help us identify where we can improve. And notice again, we're talking about buckets, exposed, and security ports unrestricted. So why do we keep seeing the same thing over and over in different products and giving us different alerts? Again, because we are failing at these things. I'm pretty sure people have seen those exclamation marks in red and the other exclamation in orange, and they just breeze through them because they I don't know, don't care or don't understand or something. But again, you in security, you're going to be responsible for holding people accountable for all these weird things that they might be doing out there and might be exposing your systems. Okay. Now, and here we go. Some people ask me, hey, I'm not sure, where do I go to learn more about the basics? What is it that I absolutely should be doing? Baseline type level security, what do I do? And the answer here is the providers have their own guidance, like I mentioned. Basically every provider, AWS, Azure, Google, Oracle, Alibaba, you name it, IBM, all the cloud providers, they have what they consider baseline level of guidance. And sure, some of them read like a fat book at the library of history or something, but there's going to be some value in understanding what that baseline security is. Also, Something that might be a little bit better is we have these third parties like the Center for Internet Security, the Cloud Security Alliance, and NISA. We have a whole bunch of entities out there that are kind of putting a whole bunch of people in a room, subject matter experts, and coming with that summarized high-level guidance on how to secure things. Those might be a little bit easier to digest than some of the extensive documentation, or in some cases, not that extensive, that the providers may have out there. But again, you're going to have some sort of starting point. If you're in the DoD sector, the SRGs, the STIGs, there's a lot of guidance everywhere that you look. And the other thing is what you guys are doing here. Come to these talks, ask questions there in the Discord, see what others are doing. I see a lot of things flying by, people providing excellent tips out there. That is what you have to be doing also. What are others doing? Trust me, you're not solving problem for the first time. I bet you somebody else solved that. Do get involved out there in the in discussions that we're having, and that way you're gonna get, you know, more what I call more realistic advice of what others are doing to secure their clouds. All right. So with that, I'm gonna take a second here to shift to my console to just point out a few of the things that I've been talking about. Make sure that everybody knows how to get to those. And the idea here, again, we'll go into the console. Another thing that I want to point out should be a function of maturity. Initially, you should be going there in the console and kind of exploring it and understanding how everything is going on. An ideal state would be doing all this stuff with the command line. I know some people shy away from the command line, but my message to you is going to be don't, because it's going to make your job easier, faster, quicker. Everything is going to be quicker, easier. But again, it's going to be a function of maturity once you get a little bit more mature. But a couple of things to point out. Going here to the identity and access management in AWS, I do want to point out that the provider, they're doing their job. They're putting stuff in your face. It's like, hey, listen, there's a red thing here. Do pay attention. Sure, your root has multi-factor, but the user account does not have multi-factor. You may want to go ahead and fix that. Also notice here that if you had access keys that were inactive for a while, they would go ahead, that were active and not used, they would point that out to you. Again, one of those ways that we can get compromised. So do take a moment, make sure that if you see red, orange, something like that, you do pay attention, because the providers are telling you something and there's things that you may want to correct. Another thing, again, if you have a small environment, you may be able to go through your users and realize that at a glance here, look at the last activity. We have automation admin account that has never accessed anything, and it's a member of the admin groups. That is weird. I will look into that right away, because if there's something with admin access and it has never accessed anything, do we really need it? Something else that stands out right at me is we have 3 permutations of Rachel Green right there. Yes, I'm a big Friends fan, as you can tell by Ross Geller out there also. But what you would notice with Rachel is that we have 3 different permutations of the spelling of the name. 2 of them have never accessed anything. Good candidates for deletion. We do see that the first Rachel has accessed something, so that seems kind of okay. So again, consider accounts that do not have any sort of purpose out there. If we dive a little bit deeper into where Rachel, real user here, remember I mentioned Access Advisor. It's kind of going to help us understand that issue with least privilege. And look at what we're seeing here. Let me backtrack here for 1 second. If you see the permissions that Rachel has, it's EC2 read-only and S3 read-only. Then I'm trying to answer the question, does she need all that access? That's where Access Advisor is going to help us answer the question. Here you see that the EC2 related access, sure, has been tapped as of 17 days ago. Now, notice that what we have going on here for S3, these 2 sets of permissions, they have not been accessed in the period that it's been tracked. So is it a candidate for removal? Potentially. Again, I'm not saying because it hasn't been accessed, you have to go ahead and remove it. No, it's just that invites the conversation, and maybe have somebody follow up on that and see if that access is needed. So that's kind of the big idea there. Also, we talked a little bit about Access Analyzer, moving here on to see what kind of resources we have that are exposed outside of our internal cloud environment. Here we see that we have a bucket policy that has been applied to a bucket, and it's given it public read access. What we can do is click on that finding, and it's going to tell us, okay, that's the resource that you're exposing, and it's giving us guidance. So again, we can't say we don't know what we're going to do, because it's telling us, hey, listen, if you intend to have that access, sure, kind of risk accept it or whatever, click archive, and that's it. You understand that it's a problem and you're accepting the risk, and you're fine. Now, if it's not intended, we're going to give you some guidance on how to fix that. In this case, it's just a matter of going to the S3 console and removing the policy that is giving public access. At which point, what you would do after you fix that, you trigger a rescan, and the finding kind of would fix itself. Again, provider doing a great job of showing us a warning that you are allowing public access. Again, not a bad thing. This might be a marketing bucket that has a static website that has been served from that bucket. That's fair game. So do think about that. You have to understand the purpose of everything that you may be seeing out there. Okay. And the credential report, like I mentioned before, it's just a download. It's going to show you that information from before. Again, you're going to be best served here, kind of sort of automating this stuff. Look at what others have done out there, because yeah, it's too much. At some point, it's going to be too much to manually parse. So do think about that. All right, so pivoting here to Security Hub. What we're going to see here, as soon as it loads, is this idea of a security score. And it's going to tell you what you're passing, what you're failing based on the different standards that you are following. And if I click here on the viewing all the standards, you can see how they look for different things. And based on my current configuration, I have different things that I need to pay attention for. Let me take a look, for example, at this one right here, the Foundational Security Best Practices. It says that you have 120 checks and you have 26 failed. So you may want to go ahead and filter by that and see what are we doing here that's bad. Again, severity is going to kind of help you where you need to pay a lot of attention. And here we see some of the things that we said don't do. You should have hardware MFA. You should have buckets that are not public. And you kind of see a lot of the things that we talked about, security groups that might be overly permissive. And from there it goes as you have more lower severity things. So again, this is kind of like if you're doing vulnerability management, look at those critical, make sure that they are critical for you. Just because AWS or Azure is saying it's critical, that doesn't mean it is critical for you. In these cases, I would argue they might be universally bad, but do think about how those might be of value to you. And again, we have limited time. We have to remediate based on risk, and that's kind of what we're trying to do here. Once you go ahead and explore one of those, you have options. You can go ahead and do a similar thing to what we said. You can mark them as resolved. We can say, okay, we're going to suppress that because we're risk accepting. So whatever it is, you will definitely have options, but you will see here as that changes. So another one of those native tools that is going to be valuable for you. From there, we're going to quickly shift to config. Remember, we talk about config. It's that thing that's going to allow us to take a look at what's in our environment, network interfaces that we may have, buckets, users, all of that. At a glance, like I mentioned, if you don't use EC2s and you start seeing a whole bunch of things related to EC2s, that might be a problem. You may get to know what some rogue business unit is doing in your cloud environment just by looking at this and understanding what's out there. So it's a good thing to start looking at. One thing that I really like about config, let me dive into one of my security groups right here, is the idea of a timeline. As you can see, you also have compliance checks here. They call them conformance packs. and you can set kind of rules and see how everybody's adhering to those. Let me pick on this one here that is compliant and show you. I want to point out the resource timeline. That is something like if you're doing like incident response or something like that, or configuration management, this is going to be really helpful. The resource timeline, it's going to let you know what changes happen in your resources. There are a whole bunch of things here, but I'm going to filter by configuration changes. And I'm going to bring one up. I want to point out here that this particular group, it's meant to allow port 443 only, the security group. That was the intent of this security group. What we would see is that when it was created, some genius allowed port 80 to come in from basically any IP address, and that's not what we wanted. We said that we wanted port 443. So what config is letting us see here in this configuration change that it's been tracked is two things. First, the green is what was added. We didn't have any tags, and then we changed something to tag it with the name allow 443. So we have a hard record of that changing. Now the red means removal. We removed that port 80 madness that somebody put in there and we blew it away. Now it's only allowing port 443, which is another rule that exists out there. Big fan of the config timeline because it lets you quickly see how your resources have changed. So great tool. I already mentioned the conformance packs. Here we have a couple of examples, S3 best practices and NIST 853. But you can go ahead and say, hey, listen, I want to observe some other rule sets based on some regulation or something that I'm subject to. We have the Center for Internet Security. They have their different levels. What else do we have? If you have dealings with financial institutions, you have FFIC, FedRAMP for the government, HIPAA, so forth and so on. So you can go ahead and deploy your own, or you can go ahead and create templates that you create and define those rules yourself. So depending on what is it that you care about, you will have that flexibility. All right. So to start wrapping up here the demo and open up Q&A, let me touch on a couple of things on the Azure side. I'm an equal opportunity cloud lover. So we do have to bring Azure into the equation. Big thing that I want to point out for all of you, it's going to be Security Center. As soon as this loads, you're going to see it's really similar to Security Hub. It gives you the idea of the secure score. It's going to tell you what things can be done better, and it's going to give you a whole bunch of information. If we dive a little bit deeper here into the security score, and here we have to select the subscription, so we get to see a little bit more detail. Kind of you see the same idea. You have healthy resources, you have unhealthy resources, and there's some things that you need to fix. What I really like about this is that if I point out this column right here, potential score increase, it's going to tell you, hey, if you solve this issue, your score is going to jump up 15%, 8 points. So you may want to take a look at that. And if you expand here, it's going to tell you, hey, listen, management ports should be closed on your VMs. You should be fixing that. Again, you're not left to figure out what that means. There's a remediation step there that has details on what is it that you need to go. You need to go to the VM, networking blade, and change the ports. So again, it's giving you a whole bunch of details, and you can even pivot to those resources from there and do some things. You can also go ahead and risk accept. You can go ahead and say exempt, and you can do more things a little bit more advanced and trigger some what's called a logic app and maybe do auto remediation and some things. So you do have a great set of options right here. One more thing that I want to point out for those of you who might be in the GRC space, you do have the similar idea of observing benchmarks. Here, for example, we are observing a couple of ISOs, PCI, and what this allows you to do is say, okay, I care about PCI 27001. Maybe I want to look at what I need to do with OPSEC, what's happening with my login and monitoring, and yeah, there's some things that I need to fix. It's pointing out that I need to change my diagnostic settings. And if you remember from earlier, I said that Azure does tend to log less by default than than AWS. And let me pivot quickly here and give you an example of what that is. If we take a look at our VMs, if we go to the diagnostic settings blade here under the monitoring blade and then the diagnostic settings, you're going to notice that what they call host level metrics are not being collected. You would have to enable that. It's giving you a warning that you can do it while the machine is running. You have to shut it down. But again, I don't have a lot of logging from a host level perspective happening here right now. I will need to enable that. Now, the way that it's going to look once I enable it, let me go back to my VMs and look at my VM01, and we go again to the monitoring tab and we look at diagnostics. Now we see we're collecting a whole bunch more things. We're talking about CPU, memory, and disk and network, and we're capturing application security and system logs. Really, really important to capture this. Example, if you have Windows hosts and you're doing something like sysmon, you're capturing those logs on the endpoint, you do have to turn this functionality on so you do have those sysmon logs centrally available somewhere, and maybe send them to some other product, Sentinel, etc. But you need to be able to capture that, and you have to be very intentional about doing so. What I would say is that diagnostic setting context here on the right changes depending on what you're using. Example, if you go to the web application firewall and you click on diagnostic settings, it's a whole different context here, and you can enable all kinds of logs to understand what people are trying to access through your WAF. So again, this is going to be, the context will change depending on whatever asset you're tracking in your cloud. So do think about all of that, and understand your assets, understand how they're going to be. And to wrap it up here, show you what I'm talking about. If we look at a Unix-based VM here, look at what we have. This is all Linux, Unix-specific stuff, cron job logs, and all kinds of syslog and everything. Again, depending on what asset you have, your diagnostic settings will change. So that's kind of the idea here at a high level. Do account for everything that you have going on. Make sure that you're being really, really careful about enabling all the logs that you care about, because it's going to be important that you do so, right? And with that, we have run a little bit longer than I wanted, but let's go ahead and see. I think we have a little bit of time for a few questions if anybody wants to throw some out there.
Awesome. I'm going to come on, Roger, just for the QA part while we're waiting to see if any questions come in.
I want to call out just great discussion out there on the Discord. So make sure you take a look at that, because there's a lot of great tools that have been put out there, other resources. So excellent stuff out there. Yes.
Oh yeah, yeah. We have a great community on our Discord. Somebody did ask
one question that came through. Any view on LogPoint? I don't know if you went through that or not.
Not familiar off the top of my head with that tool,
Okay.
unfortunately. Yeah, there's a lot of different tools out there. So yeah.
Someone else did ask, what's a good resource for CloudSec?
Like I mentioned, here in the discussion, there's a lot of things. I saw a lot of things fly by. Of course, didn't have time to catch on all of them, but I did notice a lot of people pointing specific resources, architecture documents, tools. I saw a lot of great tools that I'm familiar with being mentioned there. Some people ask about training. So your training was mentioned there. There's a lot of good stuff. So I would say go through those, because there's nothing better than what others out there are recommending. I can say something, but getting all those different viewpoints that are out there in the Discord, absolutely great, because you get so many different views from different people.
Awesome.
Did you see the question from Cactus? It says, do you know any knowledge about logging delays for these platforms? 15 minutes seems to be the likely.
Yeah, that's a limitation. Something like CloudTrail is known for that. Like so I mentioned, if you have some need for real-time logs, you may need to look into some other things. CloudWatch has some ways that you can play with that in AWS and kind of create some near real-time alerts. But it's a challenge. If this is where you may need some third-party tools that might help with that. But really hard to get real-time insight for sure.
And it looks like Hexactly says, do you find common issues with teams maintaining their AWS, but not properly configuring other hosting solutions that are used for smaller projects here and there?
Yeah, and that's something that happens. Sometimes you have a big presence in something that's kind of established, like, wait, this is what you're going to do, A, B, C, D, this is what the company is using. And then you have, I kind of jokingly, have serious, called the rogue business unit, where they're going to say, oh, I want to go ahead and do Azure, even though what we do is AWS. And I mean, we're there to support the business from a security perspective. So what that means is that we're going to have to follow. As security practitioners, even though we want to keep it in one place, AWS, and that's what we do, and we're not going to do anything else, somebody somewhere is going to want that, and I'm there to enable the business. So we're going to have to learn. That's going to be on us. We'll first make sure that we bring awareness that those tools are being used in our environments, and then go from there. But we're going to have to follow.
And it does look like there's another one, shared security responsibility. I understand it's applicable for IaaS, trying to understand how does it fit into SaaS or PaaS?
So for, I'm assuming we're talking about platform as a service also and software as a service. The answer is the same for both. Since we're giving more control to the provider, we have to hold them accountable. And we have to ask questions. That is what we can do. They can say, oh yeah, sure, we do security. And somebody like Amazon, if you're using one of their PaaS offerings or Azure, sure, they have a lot of reports. And if you become a customer and you sign an NDA, they may give you more information. But I would say pay a lot of attention with SaaS providers, because we have some massive SaaS providers like Office 365, the Google Suite, all that. But if you have the one-trick ponies, a little application that does one thing and one thing only, then we have to start asking even more questions. Do you have like a SOC report I can see? Do you have some third-party audit that I can take a look at? Do you do penetration testing? Are you willing to show me some evidence? So that's what I mean by holding those all those accountable. Ask questions.
It looks like heuristic says open source tools are worthy for cloud security assessment, like Prowler, Scout Suite, etc.
Absolutely, all of those tools have their value, and something that I mentioned, and this is my personal opinion, always try the open source tools. I'm not a fan of spending a lot of money on tools when I can use something else. If I use one of those tools and they work, fantastic. What I do see out there is that as environments grow, some of those open source tools may fall a little bit short, and there might be a lot of value either in complexity of the environment. A commercial tool might be a better fit, or if you have limited resources, you might be better served, human resources, I should say. If you have only a few analysts, do you really want them to do a lot of manual work? That's where, again, some of those more commercial tools are going to go ahead and help you out, because they have dashboards and they're going to help you with some automation that somebody who has the time would develop themselves. But in reality, we in security are always busy, and we're going to get a lot of value by doing this stuff with some third-party tools at some point.
All right.
Yeah, that's all the questions I could readily see.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any more. And Roger, you are on our Discord server as well, so I'm sure you wouldn't mind hanging out there for a little bit to answer any other questions that end up coming through. But we are going to wrap up the GoToWebinar session for everybody. I do want to remind everyone this session was being recorded, and so if you missed the entire thing, that's okay. And we've actually started live streaming it to YouTube, which means you can go view the recording right now if you want to. I shared the link inside of the Discord for everybody, which again, one more reminder, if you haven't joined us on Discord, please join now. I shared the link again and go to webinar. Even though the webcast is over, the conversation never ends on Discord. We also post updates on our upcoming webcast there as well, so make sure you're joining. Roger, big thank you again for the presentation today. It was really nice getting to talk with you too in the pre-show banter beforehand. And hopefully we will see you at Way West or Deadwood next year.
All right. Well, have a good rest of your day, everyone, or evening or morning, wherever you are in the world. And thanks so much for joining us.
Yes, we will see you in the next webcast.
All right. Bye.